and thanks for being here tonight. Looking forward to the discussion tonight. I put the notes from the last general community meeting, which was early December, in the chat. And I sent them around to the Leschi updates list earlier today. Because this is doubling as a PTA general meeting, we should vote those in just as a matter of record, but we will come to that later in the evening, and it's not the end of the world. We can always do that later. We want to have a lot of time for the discussion at hand. So I will kick it to Mr. Liu in a moment just to make a few remarks and any updates, but I wanted to thank Ricole Johnson and Kelly Smith in advance for volunteering to co-facilitate the discussion tonight. And just to note that this is, one discussion of what we hope will be many, and it obviously has been a difficult and disjointed year in terms of communication and community outreach, with the extra challenges of COVID. But we certainly as a PTA and just as a broader community, there's been a lot of interest in having affinity group meetings as well, as we've talked about at some other meetings. So that will be other opportunities, but not limited to that, to continue the discussion that we're having tonight and related discussions that come up as pertains to racial justice and equity and representation at our school and in our school community. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Liu.
Great, thank you, Benson. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I think this is a great start of the conversation to really see how can we align our actions and words in our school community, and also just getting feedback or giving feedback to the school about what can we do to improve and in our work around racial equity and social justice. So thank you for participating in this conversation, and thank you to Ricole and to Kelly for co-facilitating this. You might have other questions about other things that are happening, and just real briefly, I will be reaching out to kindergarten and first grade families to offer a few times to meet, to just go over information that I have about a potential reopening plan, as well as just listen and write down questions that you have so that I can bring those questions to district leaders. But that's going to be for a different meeting and different times, and I will be communicating that with all kindergarten and first grade families. But yeah, otherwise, thank you again for coming, and I'm going to hand it over to Ricole and Kelly.
Benson, thank you, Mr. Liu. And Benson, did you want to do our land acknowledgement tonight before we do that?
Sorry, I was unmuting there. Yes, thank you for the reminder. Give me a moment because I should pull it up. I haven't fully memorized that as of yet. Okay. We acknowledge that the land on which we stand today is the traditional home of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish tribes since time immemorial. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering or to this dialogue. Please join in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways, and for being neighbors to this day. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Benson. Okay, I am going to flex my Zoom muscles and share my screen, because Ricole and I are going to share some slides to help guide our conversation. They're short, they're not long. Just one second. All right. Is that a thing you can see? Cool. Okay. I never really know how to do. What do you do? Okay, those who are teaching on Zoom every day, what do you do with the gallery view while you're sharing like a presentation?
For yourself, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so when
Go
you're
up,
seeing
you
my
want,
screen,
Yeah.
are you seeing the gallery view as well, or just the screen, just the presentation?
Mostly the presentation.
Cool. Okay. Great. Thanks for coming to our community conversation about Black Lives Matter at Leschi. I'm going to start with a quote from this really awesome book that you might have read that came out last year. You cannot solve anything that you do not admit exists. I like that. I like just the thought that when we're talking together about Black Lives Matter, that even when we're sharing about uncomfortable things, that problems that still exist at our school, that's in service of, that's in love and in service of all of our kids. I also really like this quote from Ijeoma Oluo, the author of So You Want to Talk About Race. It's from the introduction of that book. We can find our way to each other. We can find a way to our truths. I've seen it happen. My life is a testament to it, and it all starts with conversation. I really like how the subject of her whole book is talking about race and how getting a really clear understanding of the way race and systemic racism functions in our society actually helps us to bridge that talking with action. So I'm just going to share our purpose. Ricole and I talked a little bit about this. Why are we having this conversation? So our school community is participating in Black Lives Matter at School's Week of Action. And as our students are learning about discussing and centering Black lives in their classes this week, we also were considering this a great opportunity to facilitate a conversation about Black Lives Matter at Leschi for the grown-ups in our community. And our outcomes of having this conversation are listening to the voices of our community, amplifying the Black voices of our community, and working to bridge our words and our actions. So choosing tangible next steps for community action.
I have another comment before you jump into the map. So good evening, everyone. Ricole here. This conversation is also part of a national conversation, Black Lives Matter at School. And I will put the link in the chat for everyone if you're interested. It's February 1st through the 5th this week. So we're right on target. And the three goals of the week is a week of action, a year of purpose, and a lifetime of practice. So I thought I'd add that. So we're, and also Seattle Public Schools has it as one of the efforts as well. So we're just in line with this week, it being the beginning of Black History Month as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a map for the conversation that we hope to have tonight. And it really, as you'll see, is very open. It will not be Ricole and I presenting to you. It will be us facilitating you. So we really hope and ask you to contribute if you can and feel comfortable. And even if you don't feel comfortable. Okay, so the first part is we're going to look at how do Black Lives Matter at Leschi? So how is our staff and school community working toward this statement being true? And then our second part is we'll look at where do we still have work to do to make Black Lives Matter at Leschi? What gaps exist in our systems that remain inequitable? And the last part, we will look at what actionable next steps can our Leschi community, and thinking specifically of our parent community, but also maybe advocacy work for our school, like our staff and admin, what actionable next steps can they take and we take to close the gaps and improve racial equity at Leschi? So you see the time guidelines on the side. Those are guidelines. We didn't quite know when we started this conversation that we had almost the entire meeting tonight to have this conversation. So our time guidelines are a little bit looser, but we'll just see if we can be mindful of time.
So by way of guidelines for tonight's conversation, two key points. We'd like to practice active listening in that we listen to understand and work to empathize with the speaker. We also take space and make space. We monitor our airtime to make space for all prior to prioritizing and amplifying Black voices. Next slide.
I'm doing it. Oh, okay. Got it.
So first part, and I will kick this one off, and this one will be just, the floor will be open for all voices to chime in. So how do Black Lives Matter at Leschi? Can you give specific examples from the admin, the teachers, the staff, family support, parent volunteers, students, teams, etc.? Just, feel free to share. And our intent is to capture those items. We'll be writing them down, and then at the end, we will, obviously send those notes that we captured out. But unmute yourself or write in the chat. And then, you can use emojis if you agree with others. And then before we move on to the next part, we'll just parrot back what we heard for everyone to agree. And then we'll move to the next part. So how do Black Lives Matter at Leschi? Who'd like to start?
This is Michelle. I think that I'm going to say in one way that I believe that Black Lives Matter at Leschi a lot. I do think that like the community of majority of staff and community are a small bit, I would say, really care.
Okay.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Oh, okay.
And hey, everybody, but I'm gonna be on no screen, okay?
No worries.
And I'm pressed for time. I have something else going on, but I do feel that there is a strong culture of that. One thing I do believe that is because of the longevity of some of the staff members that have been there and what they bring, and how that is infused, but it's only infused with a handful of staff and community. We'll say community. Only a handful of community, and the community is now not Black. So I'm just saying that's, it's just a handful. You pretty much know the same ones all the time. So that, but I will say it does matter, and it shows up with support staff, and I wish it would show up with teaching staff and support services and the resources, or but I just, this teaching staff piece in the last couple of years I have not seen. And yeah, I don't want to keep going, but that's it, and leave room for someone else. I apologize.
Thank you, Michelle.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Good evening, Mr.
Good
D.
evening. Part of I'm gonna jump right to some of the things. Is it go to right what we're doing for some of the students, or do students have voice already, or am I jumping the gun?
It's your choice. I think this first portion of tonight is just to kind of acknowledge how they're being, how Black lives do matter at Leschi. The subsequent parts will get into how things can be improved and what actions we can take. But for now, it's just kind of acknowledging how they do matter, affirming, if you will.
I think through the Boys and Girls Group as a start. You know, we've been doing it a few years, so I know Rising Sons, and I just said Rising Daughters because I didn't know it sounded appropriate to me. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But I just think their voice is being heard there and that they know it. I mean, you know, when we first started, this was years ago, hesitancy to say anything that, well, it's building up trust, right? Because they said something like they thought a teacher did something towards them or because they were Black, they were afraid to say it because they thought we might go back and tell, right?
Yeah.
And so now that they know, if the discussion does come up, first it's anonymous, nobody's name, but we just don't say a student, we say we have student concerns that some teachers, they feel are, well, use the word racist or don't care about it. So having felt comfortable in that space, and then with the dialogue between the student equity team, I think that's been huge just because other students besides students of color are on that team. And when they hear our students of color, our Black students speak, I think it helps them understand what they're going through. So, and they're very receptive ears and a lot of knowledge in that space. So I think they know that they just don't have the Black community and staff listening, but also their peers who might not be Black, but also are interested in why they have to struggle and they don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, I do agree with Shell. Staffing, as far as certified teachers, we probably could have more, I'd say more Black teachers, but also we have to have Black teachers who are in the pool. So I mean, it's not just a Leschi situation, it's a district situation, it's a national situation too. So we have to find ways to encourage, you know, because it's not encouraging to be a teacher. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, you know, when students see things at school, oh, I'll never do that. You know, first, you know, they bring up pay, but also they see some of the disrespect going on or some of the chaos. So I don't think that's a field people want to go into. So we have to somehow figure how we can make that more attractive. And, you know, even like we have student teachers from the UW or Seattle, where we have them from, maybe take some of our 4th or 5th grade students who just show an inkling to be interested in teaching and have them shadow teachers and maybe be student teachers on an elementary level, for lack of a better phrase. You know, just follow the teacher, maybe work with somebody and say, you know, like I want to be a teacher in the 5th grade. Say that's I would like to be. Maybe I can follow like a Ms. Blackwood or somebody around the classroom. Just, you know, maybe even do a lesson plan so she can show me things to do. I think that might encourage more students to get into the pool. It's not going to solve the problem now, of course, but at least we can look towards the future.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Donaldson that, you know, I think showcasing or profiling, featuring teachers that are doing well and just, you know, having them serve as, you know, sort of role models, you know, you have to plant those seeds early. I think that's what happens in other fields when you're talking, you know, doctors and engineers, and you just don't see it as much with people in the teaching profession. So it does have to start early. But, you know, going also back to sort of affirming the things that I see at Leschi that feels good about, you know, how the school embraces Black Lives Mattering. I mean, it's more symbolic than anything, but I really do appreciate the fact that, you know, there's the T-shirts and sweatshirts and you know, there's when you walk on campus and you see students of different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, wearing shirts that say Black Lives Matter at Leschi, and that connection to the school. It's something that I don't see at a lot of schools. So again, while it is more of a, you know, kind of a, again, it's sort of a, you know, surface level type thing. It's not, you know, it still counts. And I think it's good because, especially with young people, with kids, because they know it's okay. And they know it's okay to talk about it and to demonstrate that and to express it. You know, we're starting to see it become more, you know, universally accepted around the world and around the country. But I like the fact that Leschi was doing it way before the world sort of got on board. And so that feels good to know that as a school, they were already doing the right thing, and it's like the rest of the world is catching up now. So that feels good.
That's a good point. Also, highlight when we do our yearly, or maybe a couple times a year, but especially the first of the year, our high five, when we bring in a lot of our African American community and leaders in different job fields and retirees. So many people come to the event, and then if you haven't seen it, that whole day after that seems to have a different feel. It just seems like spirits are up. Everybody seems to be happy. I just get that feel every time we have one. And then also highlighting our assemblies where our students, especially when we do our Black History Night assembly, how the students are engaged in that conversation too and partake in it. And some students you never would think, or they haven't in the past, let me clarify, would take part in the assembly. Students who might be having some struggles in class get up and do poems, they sing, they recite. So once they see that, maybe that assembly and the high five can encourage them to do other things. So I think those two things really highlight, along with the t-shirts, I do like that comment, and all the other things are really encouraging our students that they're valued and that they're respected. So obviously we need to do more, but I think those are starts.
Okay, anyone else would like to share? How do Black Lives Matter at Leschi? I think we're coming close to our 10 minutes for this part. And thank you, Benson, for capturing notes in the chat. Were there any questions or comments in the chat that maybe someone didn't want to speak on the camera? I might have put something in the chat. I don't see anything. Okay.
I was going to say one more thing, that just on a more surface level, but when you walk into Leschi, you also notice just the artwork around the building.
I was going to say that, yep.
Just kids' work and diversity of all type, Black lives especially, but and like the girls group and highlighting their artwork. I mean, right when you walked in, that always struck a chord with me. The work that they did after school and it being presented right when you walked in. And I think when anyone walks into Leschi, they can see it.
Yeah, I agree. And the posters, not necessarily the kids' artwork, but also with the posters that, of great Black Americans, that means a lot to have those images through the hallways. So I don't know if it's just February or all the time. I don't remember, but
they're up all the time.
Yeah, see, that's awesome.
Sarah's comment in the chat. I
Okay.
like that Leschi incorporates Black history and ethnic studies into the curriculum for kids as young as kindergarten, and the effective Black parenting class offered at Leschi may be the most important class and the best class I've ever taken, and I've learned a lot. I also just want to highlight the leadership of some of our Leschi staff in really getting those Black Lives Matter at School lessons to be a school-wide effort and something that everyone's doing. And I want to in particular call out Caitlin Brandon, Miss Brandon, who also runs the organization Colorful Pages and works really hard to teach other grown-ups about incorporating books that feature Black and brown children and center their lives, not just about Black history, but about being a kid and solving a problem and having joy and celebrating your identity. And I think her work is really extraordinary, and we're lucky to have her at Leschi.
I would throw Miss Woods in there. They work pretty closely together. And actually, before the year started, we beat Miss Woods, Miss Brandon, Mr. D. And I don't know if this was if you guys went over this earlier. I'm sorry, I was late. I had another meeting. We're working on a small effort to engage the larger Leschi community around Black Lives Matter, and I had a couple things planned, but COVID being COVID, things didn't pan out. But I'm sure once we go back to somewhat of a normal life, I think we'll pick that up as well, right? So that the community around us is very well aware of where we stand with Black Lives Matter, and then we can have some conversations with those that maybe need to be brought along a little more. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was just going to add that it might not be that deep, but I really, people hear me. Okay. Appreciated Principal Liu encouraging the kids to tell their parents to go to the MLK March, that it's, it gets just beyond just our school community, but part of the larger community and activism.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if there are no further comments on this part, don't worry, we can always come back. But I think it is time to move to part 2. And then Kelly will lead that discussion. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm sharing my screen again. Thank you,
Yep.
Nicole. So we'll move to our next slide. And this says, getting real about what we still have to do to ensure Black Lives Matter at Leschi. So where do we still have work to do? What gaps exist in our systems, in our school, that remain inequitable? And I think if we can, in this section, just trying to stay focused on Leschi. I know it's so tempting. I mean, we know that we're part of a broader community, we're part of a context. There's lots to say right now about Seattle Public Schools. There's lots to say about our city. There's lots to say about our country. But I think the effort for this conversation and the intention is just to try to stay with Leschi for now. So again, we'll work to give a specific example, and being really careful to, our goal here isn't to call out specific people, but just thinking about examples from these different sort of parts of our community, maybe from our leadership, our teaching staff, our support staff, our family support, the way our parent community is, work that we think could be done with our students, our family teams. So again, please feel free to unmute yourself to share your contribution aloud or write your contribution in the chat. You can consider showing your agreement with hand signals or in the chat. And then after we share, then I'll paraphrase or summarize at the end. And I'm gonna stop the share. I really like to be able to see the gallery of everybody and all of your faces. So I'll stop the share for now.
The disproportionality in Black students being put out of class for various reasons, rather hastily, in my opinion. That's huge. Also, academically, our babies are behind, and figuring a way to make that better, get them more services into the building that can help them be successful, and also less time out of class. I mean, it does, personally, when I have that time with them when they're out of class, we can really work on some of the things they need to work on to get back into class, but they're missing so much time academically. We really have to work on that side to get them in class. And once you see your success and feel your success, things move on. But that putting kids out of class really, I could do a billion really has to stop. For the littlest reason, I've had students come down, the teacher say what he did, he wouldn't spit his gum out. I mean, it's just like that. Or if my clock was stuck on a time at 1 o'clock, for example, I could tell what class and what time and what subject they were teaching, whoever was teaching at that time when certain students would come down. That's frightening. If I could just, and it's daily, I could set my time by it. Oh, it's 1 o'clock, such and such is down from such and such's room. And it's daily. So we really have to do that. And also find ways to engage our Black parents. I know that some of them are working multiple jobs or in certain situations. Encourage, make sure they can come into the building, even if we have to provide a child care for youngsters, right? So they can spend time with their babies and also maybe help tutoring them too. I think that's another way we can get them involved in our Leschi community.
Thanks, Mr. D.
I'll co-sign that and just share that. It's something that as a Black parent, I noticed, and I'm fearful of when that will be my kid who is sent to the room for something minor. And it's disproportionately happening to the same students. As a volunteer, I've noticed that, and I do think it's something that we need to really figure out how we solve.
Mm-hmm. And if they're coming from certain classrooms, we really need to intervene with that teacher or teachers and find ways to assist them in working with the students. I don't want to just put them down or anything and say, you know, you're terrible, maybe you shouldn't work at Leschi. Having said that, things just ran through my mind, so excuse me. I think we have to find ways to work with them that can let them know they're teachers, and there's always ways to improve. We just can't just cast everybody aside, but we have to build the best staff we can for our needs, and that might be one way to look at it, or better scrutiny of who's in our building teaching our kids, our Black students.
This is Michelle. I agree with Mr. Donaldson, and I appreciate the volunteer saying something about what she sees. It's different being a parent and then coming and working inside of the school, because being a parent, if you like a working parent, you're there to drop your kid off, you respond to the teachers, text messages, you can't be there all the time. You even being a part, participating in things when school is out, when you're off. But being eyes and being able to see things inside is a little bit different. When you have a kid that comes from there and they are they get to middle school with a little struggles, but then behind academically, and you constantly see it. You constantly see it with kids that transition on because you're still connected with them, and the struggles that they have going into middle school, and the academics, is a really, really big thing. And just that we're always just trying to focus on discipline and putting kids in counseling, And I just really think that is, we need to try to, if we're going to be doing anything different, we just need to make sure that we're, I don't know, just more of a holistic approach is type of a thing. But those are the gaps that I see. And it's a little bit more to it, just like right now during COVID and technology, you can see all the inequities with kids and resources. I mean, it's like right as day, and hustling and bustling to get technology, and then hotspots, and just to learn, and then they're behind, and there's no equity there, and then it's just trying to get more of our kids, our Black and brown students, where they need to be is really hard with them on Zern, because that's like, it's at grade level, and then they're having to drop down the Zern missions, or however that process works to lower them. If they're fourth grade, it's getting lowered down to third grade level math. So those type of things are what I see. And yeah, when being in school, I noticed talking to a lot of parents, they're happy that they don't get all the calls, all the text messages about behavior, but not as much as about their academics and where they are, just more about attendance if they're logged on, but not really, the connection of how they're doing with their SPED teacher, or just how they're doing until it's conference time, or, so not everyone, but that is a lot of what's going on from my point of view.
And also the disproportionality, and we can speak specifically to Leschi, two of us students of color, Black boys, especially boys in special ed. I mean, there's times when people just, well, maybe they're going through A, B, or C. Well, let's have a sit meeting. The first thing at the sit meeting is maybe we should test for special ed. So that comes up so frequently, and one of the first, that's not a solution. It never is. But I mean, we know some students need to. I have a son who was in SPED, so I understand that. But that can't always be the first. That can't be the absolute. The first step we take is a sit or an MTSS, and then go right into maybe, Gerald should be evaluated for SPED. So that's a huge turnoff for a lot of our parents. And even if some students actually need that service, it's been so abused that parents don't want their babies in there. They just don't want them in because they think they're just a place to house cattle.
Thanks, Michelle and Mr. D.
Just to tag on with what Michelle was saying, I don't think Leschi helps families know where their students are. It's not clear if your student is performing like at grade level, and there's no like screaming alarm that's like, your kid is slipping and these are the 3 things that we can do to help, but we need your help too. Like there's no like, this is a team and we're on it. I mean, I'm sure some kids get that, but you see it being in the building and talking to parents, and they're somewhat surprised, or, oh, you're working, oh, I've never heard that my kid struggled with math or with math facts or whatever.
That's right. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
I think Mr. D's comment about automatically having a conversation about SPED with our Black and brown boys and girls is really stark. That's really stark to me, because I know of several white families who claimed that they had to battle to get their kids tested to get IEPs. So there's clearly a bias going on at the first instance where these kids are encountered, where there's this assumption that a Black student would be needing SPED and a white student, their parents are advocating for them to get IEPs. That's shocking to me.
And a lot of times, the piggyback is usually the first go-to is they could do better academically if their behavior was under control. Well, I don't, that sounds hard to say for me, because you can't control people first. But that's one of the first things that comes up. So if you look at paperwork, I imagine a lot, probably higher than most in our SPEDers, because of some type of behavior. Versus where you might be having trouble and you might get upset that you can't do something, and that shouldn't be seen as behavioral. It should be perceived as frustration that I can't do this work, I'm being challenged, and we should approach it from that aspect versus to put you somewhere because you need to calm down. I mean, I get frustrated if I can't do something, so I get frustrated. So, and I've seen it, and just find ways to work with our students and our families to say, well, such and such is having some challenges. how can we help you? And they really explain in detail why that test could help. Even if they're not placed in SPED, we can get some information that's helpful for the parents to know how we can work with their children. So I think that's an important thing we need to do too.
Well, and the bias towards punishing those behaviors in Black and brown children versus ignoring or trying to work around them with white children.
Mm-hmm. And that does consume a lot of time and out of class. And then it's rather ironic that teachers or some teachers will say, well, they have a better relationship than you do with me. Well, yes, I almost said a bad word. I'm not going to try to cuss tonight. Yes, but they spend more time with me. And once we figured out why they got there, I've even had teachers say, well, they come down there and seem like they're having fun. Well, once we resolve what they were discussing, when we got sit down, we can move on because I don't need to harp on that situation, right? My job is to make you feel better, get you back in class and go on. It's not just to dwell on, what such and such did all day. I need to get you back in class. And part of getting you back in class is have a better attitude. I mean, change the whole focus of, okay, that didn't work this time, let's go back. And let's see if we can do a better job. So, but if you keep going back to the same situation, getting the same results, the same kids again, 1 o'clock daily, they'll be down. So it just can't be, I'm having a bad day. We need to address why am I getting put out versus me just it can't always be my fault, right? And I don't even think it's a fault. It's an easy way out. It's an easy way to put somebody out of class. I've heard teachers say, "Well, such and such was in here today. Well, we had a great day." That's bull. That's a disrespect.
What about like the low like we set the bar really low. We want, if we had the bar up here and say, we know you can do it. We, for the students, the philosophy of Leschi, like this is our bar, we're gonna get there. But we have such a low bar on the day-to-day basis. And it's confusing. Each classroom has different rules, the school has different rules. Outside playgrounds, each classroom says different things. We don't have the same language. And so I think from year to year, it's pretty confusing going through. You don't know what the boundaries are. You don't know what you can push, what you have to kind of control. And I think if we had consistent messaging, it would help just build the school community.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just call attention to a couple of contributions from the chat. One comment is thinking about the sense of belonging and asking students what they think would work for them to facilitate their learning. How can we engage students in a way where they feel ownership and get more student voices, and how we support students best? Another comment is about hiring staff. There could be a better screening process when it comes to new teacher hires, as well as educating current teachers in need of enlightenment and understanding African American culture. There have been incidents with teachers displaying inequitable treatment and discipline stemming from their misunderstanding and preconceived notions of Black culture and how that relates to their behavior and learning style. We also got a comment about how can we celebrate Black history together as a school this year to make our African American scholars feel proud and all scholars to honor their classmates and history. Does anyone, we've heard a bit about the discrepant way that behavior is treated at Leschi. We've heard about a focus on academics, and especially particularly in the communication of how students are doing academically with their families. We've heard about staff just knowledge about how to work with Black children. And we've heard about the bias for testing for special education. We've heard about the bias toward punishing behavior in Black and brown children. And we've heard comments about the bar of kind of low expectations and confusing messaging. We haven't heard much yet about our parent community, just ways that you see that our systems are inequitable. which is interesting because we're the parent community right here. And I want to give an opportunity for people to share about that. Also thinking about things like after school. It's a weird year, this pandemic year, but we have a long history of providing some after school programming. So maybe thinking about that, and also, yeah, just anything else with student grouping. My own contribution, I think, on this is just really thinking about how our data, at least the last data I've seen, still shows just a stark gap between the way that Black and brown children are performing on the different academic measures versus white children at our school. But like Katie, I've always wondered, like, how, we say that we have this unapologetic focus on Black children. So what does that look like with regard to looking at that data and taking next steps?
A lot. The meetings, like this is 7 o'clock, and I mean the beauty of Zoom is you can be home and do it. So, and I'm in a couple other groups that I'm thinking, boy, Zoom is fantastic on a 7 o'clock meeting, right? So if there are going to be staff meetings at night or parent meetings, just do both. Where they can have access to Zoom or whatever we're on, or in person. I think you get more parents of color involved in. And then, is it really welcoming when you come into a meeting? I know even me personally, I go to meetings, I think, dang, there are no Black people here, after certain hours. And we got to also keep in mind a lot of our population don't live inside the city limits, right? If you're homeless or if you stay where affordable housing is, keep those things in mind. So we're not really making it open for our parents of color to have their voice heard. I know in the past we did a Black Parent Night. We had our own Black parent group in ELL, just to get, if they have that group meeting for just that group, more people are more likely to step up and then join the PTA because they've had their voice heard. So I think the biggest thing is finding more accessibility to having voice heard, being this style in person. The morning chats, we can get people to come in and say, drop your baby off, let's talk 10 or 15 minutes about some of your concerns, and have that always open to parents. And for Steve, I know I just know you from Zoom in Friday chats, grab and go. But just your accessibility is going to really be the driving factor our parents feel. Because if they're welcome and just get parents involved from your perspective. And then I know teachers do a lot, so I hate volunteering because I would stay myself, and my wife would stop staying. But we really have to find time, even if it's the weekends or whatever, just to get parents engaged in the building. I tried years ago, and the district said we couldn't do it at Leschi. I was trying to, and I had Seattle Central ready to go. We were going to have an ELL program. Where you get some academic support for our parents in their computer lab on Saturdays, where you could come in, but they I don't know why they said it was going to be expensive. So just things like that. It was a GED program, so we were going to try to get some of our parents a GED, and they just said it wasn't going to work. It was going to be too expensive to hire a janitor. But I think things like that would get parents involved in the school. If we help them academically, they can better understand their children's academic needs. And, we can try again. And after school program. I've just been in touch with a gentleman in Redmond, and he's working with the High Tea Golf Association and for Black youth. And he just sent me an email yesterday. He wants to get our boys and girls groups, the first two, their smaller groups, involved with golf, and also after school program that addresses the academic side, and then on the weekends they go golf. So they're going to find tutors and people of color to come in and work with our students academically, and then other part of that is get them involved in the golf world as well. So, and we had, I think as many people we have come in, I know in the past, and Garfield's so expensive. I think that's another thing that keeps our parents out of Garfield. After school program is pretty expensive. So just trying to find ways where you can make it accommodating, and we need transportation to get our students to and from school. I know that was long-winded, but that's the thought.
That's okay, Mr. D. Does anyone else have any other comments for this section before we move on to try and bridge our ideas with some action? I think that comment that was just written in the chat is something I've noticed as well, that there's been an increase in frustration and decrease in empathy for students not engaging over the virtual space, and the shaming around this seems to disproportionately be directed to students of color. Thank you for that comment. So I'm gonna share our screen again. Raquel's, we have, if there's other contributions, they'll also be recorded if I missed anyone. We'll try to move on to our part 3 next.
So next steps. How do we bridge our words and actions? What actionable next steps can our Leschi community and PTA community take to close the gaps and improve racial equity at Leschi? Based on what you've heard in tonight's conversation, what are some concrete action items that you can offer up? Kind of heard some throughout, but this is the time to really distill down.
I'd like to follow up on the comment by Ms. Erica about screening staff. I think that sounds like such a great idea to make sure we don't have teachers that can't at least learn how to address some of these issues about racial inequity. But I'm wondering, don't we have to hire a script? Are we allowed to, as a community at our school?
We're allowed to draft the questions we want to ask candidates, but they need to be the same question for every candidate that is applying for that position. Just to clarify.
Yes. So we do have to ask questions off a script right there.
Yeah, but we can craft the questions, but they need to be the same for every applicant for that position.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe also getting more parents trained to be on an interview committee. That's one step. Secondly is have a student interview committee where if we have 5 candidates, for example, and we start talking to the first candidate, the second candidate could be being interviewed by the student interview committee. I don't know if their scores are counted in elementary, but they're going to be in that person a lot longer than any of us in the building. So they can get a feel, and we can listen to their input of how they gauge, because students or babies are very perceptive. And just to get their input when we start that process would be I've been pushing for years. I think we were going to do it this year, and then what happened. But I think that would be a good step. Parents and students involved in the interviewing process.
I also would say, as far as, because being a part of that process, not doing interviews in a sense of urgency, maybe there is an urgency for that position to be filled, and then you have applicants and you need it filled, but unfortunately, even you're going with someone who, even that team was like, that's all we have, type of a thing. So that's something I think important to look at. And even the process, like, what pools you have to pick from, how that is done. And how does that, how does that work with how does those particular applicants work with our culture? Like, there does the questions, maybe we need to change how we are asking them and not interviewing in urgency, but, like knowing ahead of time. Yeah.
To piggyback on Michelle, what she was saying, since I've been in Leschi, we've always had a lot of Black IAs, right? We need to encourage them to get their teaching certificate, right? And we need to make it accessible, easier for them to do it. So we just, if you come in, I mean, look at Jamila, fantastic, right? She's done it. I think Danietta's doing it. Antonio, who was at Clayton, he was at Garfield less than years ago at the after school program. He's getting his certificate. I think, and it's always more IAs, Black IAs, and IAs of color than teachers in the building. So if we encourage them to do it and help them along the way, and there might be a time they say, I got a test to take tonight, I would go outside and do the research duty. You need to take that time to get ready for tonight. I mean, we have to make things easier for them so they can study, and also all that knowledge we have in the building to help them make sure they can pass the test or get, just some things like that. We get innovative. Go into rec centers, find people to come out who aren't interested in teaching and get them, on that right path. So there's some things we can do. Bring in some retired teachers to work with some of our IAs and even our current staff on how they can better work with our students and families. So we have to step outside the box in a huge way to make this baby work.
The comment in the chat, for when we get back, I would like us to implement a plan to decrease students being put out of class, maybe a log of who's sending students out, working on mitigation plans with that teacher. And a couple suggestions, there really needs to be some accountability for this. I think this discrepant discipline one is one we've been talking about for a long time, and I'm in agreement about really wanting to advocate for action on this.
That is definitely true. I appreciate that comment. Like, yes, very much so. I just think the disproportionate discipline, and I've been in. We've started the BLT where we were, going over, trying to several times. What does it look like, in different areas of just how to act in the lunchroom, what look fors, student helpers, like giving out pup pride tickets. And it's still disproportionality, disproportionality in pup pride tickets, not giving them out even to no one at all, so I we've had those conversations, and I think that when we do come to that again, it needs to be more of more student voice for one. And like, it seems like, I just want to say, like, sometimes with the educators, it seems like there's so much hierarchy there. It seems like there is so much pushback. Like, it is just a lot of, like, you go back and forth with certain things, and then it's one thing that's laid all out from a specific team, and then it's not, it just doesn't flow like that, and with everyone. So I think that's like more, I don't know, that's the thing that I noticed. I noticed that that the hierarchy with teachers, and I'm not going to do this, this is what I'm going to do, even though we see that there's an issue, not being it, even now with getting in on Zooms and trying to tap in, it's a lot.
Thanks, Michelle.
There's a comment regarding positive behavior intervention system, something that the PTA can support This
Well,
work looks at the data and will target the inequity of how students are treated and disciplined. So that's
yeah,
a concrete
and
thing. Go ahead.
I'd like to talk about PBIS, actually, positive behavioral interventions and systems. So, well, first of all, thank you everyone for just sharing. I think it's important to know that as a school leader, um, that I believe we can close these gaps, and I believe we have to. Um, and I also believe, and I know there are many examples of schools who successfully close these gaps. They do that with the achievement gap, they do it with the opportunity gap, and like Mr. D said, they do it with the relationship gap. And the relationship gap is something we have to address at Leschi. This does require a change in the climate and culture of the school. And so PBIS is one of those things. And our PBIS committee is already rolling out things and making sure that we have clear and consistent expectations for all students, um, and that students are taught what those expectations are in all the spaces of the school. That there's an alignment of how we respond to behavior, and it's really focused on keeping students in class as much as possible to really make sure that they are receiving the instruction that they need, that they deserve. Um, and also just focusing on the positive environment of the school. Nobody wants to go to a place where they don't feel good about being there. And so that's why it's going to be really important that we listen to the voices of our student equity team and our students, to really find out like what is it that makes Leschi a welcoming environment, and what is it that makes it where they don't feel like that, and how can we improve in those ways. um, PBIS also has it's very clearly not punishment. It's about focusing on growth and really trying to make sure that we're teaching students and giving students those opportunities to learn and grow as far as their behaviors. And there's also communication with families. That's so important that families need to be part of this conversation as students are learning and growing in behaviors, as all elementary students are. I love the Pup Pride tickets, and just making sure as a school leader, I know of lots of different ways that we can incentivize and make sure that Pup Pride tickets are handed out as much as possible, and especially to students who need that boost as far as feeling welcome and safe at school. I also want to say that, you know, a lot of what I'm hearing is there need to be systems in place at the school, where there's consistency and and a shared understanding with the staff about what needs to happen. If this happens, then this happens, and there's a procedure to follow that everyone knows, and that even parents know what that procedure is. That's an important piece of this. And so that includes academically. So when students are struggling, having specific procedures that are followed. And I'm a very strong believer in that we need to provide support and try every intervention we possibly can before we consider special education. We have to do it in service to our students, and to make sure that we don't continue the disproportionality that we see in schools all over. And then lastly, I just want to say that, you know, really finding and having ways that families of color can not just share, but co-design what a welcoming environment looks like at the school is going to be essential in this work. And also, how do students and families receive support? We need to get feedback on that as well from our families of color. And we need to provide opportunities where families continue to give that feedback, and really where families can see that actions are happening as a result of the feedback that we're getting. So again, thank you all for your comments. I feel strongly that these are systems that we can and we must create at Leschi.
And thank you, Steve. When you say that, when you're saying parent involvement in climate of the building and welcoming, my first thought went to have parents of color do a survey, have them write up the questions that, what they want to know from us, have them do a staff survey, but they write the survey, what they expect of us and what we think their survey, right? So they come up with the survey. Like we always have these things where we send out to parents. The district is really just a jacked up survey. It's just trying to pass it back personally. But we need to have something that parents involved in and say, okay, here's what we do. Here's our expectations. What do you guys do for this one? What do you do for these things? Have them write that. So we have to answer their questions. And we'll get better input that way if we devise something for them to write, because then it's not, if they come up with it's more personal, right? And then we're going to get their heartfelt questions and their concerns versus if we come up with something. Same with our students as well. Then.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. D. I know that we can work on this together.
Okay.
Also, I just want to say, like, I know, like, the student equity team is it's amazing, and I know that the kids, as they get older, then you have, like, the Black student equity team and things of that nature. And I just like, if we're like really trying to be radical and figure out some of these things, we have a student equity team, but I also kind of think that we need a Black student equity team as well as a Black parent. Like, I know Miss Weta is doing some really good intentional stuff with her program, and I'm sure that there's going to be some parents that are new, fresh faces that have some training in the areas of community and of more culturally relevant, a little bit of everything. I know she's on here, but she can talk more about that. But I'm just saying, like, because a lot of times we're like, we'll call a certain amount of parents, or, and if we are going to do that, like, the teachers are the ones that really know the parents, the students that are Black, that are behind, that are, like, they know, and it's kind of like, we can call who we think, but it's also going to be there. We're going to need them for a lot of it. You're going to need them because I know most of the time, if you're working all the time, you're connecting with the teacher. I mean, most of those kids have been in Leschi for a long time, so they know us, and when it comes time to resources, certain things like certain events, we it's good. We know high fives, and not even just saying resource. I don't want to say it like that, but just like they come to Black parent involvement. They come. So I just think that's something, because we say involvement, but we do have involvement. It's just, I think, more of certain events versus, okay, this is something that I got to commit to all the time. Am I able to commit to this all the time? Traveling from wherever I'm traveling? No. Virtually now, yeah. But that's just where I'm at. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just think that you have you want Black voice, you have to get them together and have them think and feel like they are leaders, because they're already in a community of people that it's changed,
Yeah,
so
thanks,
I'm just,
Michelle.
yeah.
I think what you're saying about moving beyond just like including Black voices to, I like that word you used, Mr. Liu, co-design, and also thinking about just having Black leadership. And if that means having a Black leadership group for parents and for students, that is a good way to both build community and also actually just get the leadership from where it already is, but to be a louder presence in the school. Okay, Ricole, bring us home, I think.
And Kelly, real quick, also our Leschi community, we got to get the community, if not, I mean, the business and everything else involved too. Just a quick point.
Oh, very good. Couple in the chat, and then I'll recap what I have in my notes. So someone commented, if it were possible, I'd like to see students of color have a teacher of color at least 1 year during their time at Leschi. Studies have found that there are positive outcomes when Black students have a Black teacher. Another comment, I think we talked about, did you want to add to that? Oh, okay, sorry. Also, instituting discipline processes based in restorative and transformative justice in which the consideration of who has done harm includes teachers, administrator, parent, not just seen as only about the role and responsibility of the scholars. Okay, and then recap, mostly was hearing about the interview process and including parents and students in that to get their input. Having questions related to Black culture, encourage IAs of color to get their teacher's certificate, bringing in retired teachers, having a log of who is sending students out of class and to have accountability and transparency in that. The PBIS, which we elaborated on. I think in the chat, someone said, have students get involved in the PBIS. Yeah, also have student equity team have a voice in the creation of PBIS. So we'll add that to that. And then the PTA can support that. And then listen to the student equity team, continue to give Pup Pride tickets, have systems with procedures to follow. And then have families co-design what welcoming looks like, and also have people of color write a survey. So those were a lot of good actions that we capture everything, and then we'll also be saving the text of the chat session. And thank you, Benson, and everyone who's been capturing. Hopefully that that captures everything. Any other comments? I have a kind of a something I wanted to preview with this group before we close it out. And then Kelly, you can help me close it out. I probably need to share my screen. So I'm part of the executive membership at large. And I had beginning of the year, we had an assignment to, try to put together, creatively put together some swag for the Leschi community, and kind of got delayed. And then I got inspired the other day, and so I'd like to preview something that will be coming soon. How do I share my screen? Desktop, okay. Can you see? Not yet. So coming soon, can you see my desktop?
Yeah.
Coming soon, this is my something I'd like to share with this group at least. Some of the concepts that I put together, obviously our traditional Leschi school flag. These are obviously face masks for adults and kids, different sizes and things. These are just my prototypes, if you will. And then in the spirit of Black Lives Matter Week, I came up with these other creations. Obviously, we had also already had the Leschi Love Black Lives shirts. So I was like, oh, we should do masks. And then these two are in honor of Black Lives Matter Week. So Black Lives Matter at Leschi. So hope you like it. Stay tuned for more info.
I like that.
Thank you, Ricole. Those look really good.
Sure do. Thank you.
Yes, I'm over here like, oh my God.
More to come.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys like my creative energy. Thank you.
I like that. How about some good trouble? Good trouble.
Oh, yes. My husband has that one, good trouble.
You know me with the shirts to match. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Glad you guys like it. So, all right.
Sure.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for the conversation. We, like Benson said, I don't think the idea is for this to be one and done. I think it's really clear to all of us that we want to make more link between the words we speak, the shirts we wear, and the actions that we take. I want to encourage my fellow white parents to really think about what we've heard and think about how we can both step up in some of these ways and step back to leave more space for people who are leaders in our community, but whose voices haven't typically been lifted up.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thanks everyone for.
And thank you too, Kelly.
Yes.
And Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure
Right.
speaking
Thank
with
you all.
everyone.
Thanks, Sadia. Thanks for coming.
Thank you too.
All right, y'all. Thank you. Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
Good evening.
Good night.
Hey.
All right, bye everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye.
Good night. Thank you very much, Ricole and Kelly, for facilitating that. I look
Yep.
forward to continuing this discussion.
Me too.
Same
Thanks a
here.
lot.
Thank you.
Ricole, those masks really do look awesome.
I finally got them done.